Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 14 going with today's Third Age Thursday. It's time for us to revisit those familiar and sometimes not so familiar stories of the Third Age. Now, over the last 3 weeks, we've been spending time with Aragorn as he recited the Lay of Luthien, then proceeded to ranger-splain it to the confused hobbits. And finally, we spent time, albeit not enough, in the appendices and the tale of Aragorn and Arwen to show just how significant the connection between those two couples really is. As for today, while you're watching this, if it's near release, I'm in Oxford at the 50th Oxenmoot, the annual celebration of the Tolkien Society. Sean and I will, if we're lucky and our books have arrived, be signing and selling copies of our new book, Why We Love Middle-earth, and tomorrow, recording a live episode that will air on September 17th to launch Season 8 of the Prancing Pony podcast. Being in Oxford feels a bit like going home. So in honor of that, I'm going to read today from Homeward Bound, Chapter 7 of Book 6 of The Lord of the Rings. At last they came to the Prancing Pony, and that at least looked outwardly unchanged, and there were lights behind the red curtains in the lower windows. They rang the bell, and Nob came to the door and opened it a crack and peeped through. And when he saw them standing under the lamp, he gave a cry of surprise. "Mr. Butterbur! Master!" he shouted. "They've come back!" "Oh, have they? I'll learn them," came Butterbur's voice, and out he came with a rush, and he had a club in his hand. But when he saw who they were, he stopped short, and the black scowl on his face changed to wonder and delight. "Nob, you woolly-pated ninny," he cried. "Can't you give old friends their names? Shouldn't go scaring me like that with times as they are. Well, well. And where have you come from? I never expected to see any of you folk again, and that's a fact. Going off into the wild with that Strider and all those black men about. But I'm right glad to see you, and none more than Gandalf. Come in, come in. Same rooms as before. They're free. Indeed, most rooms are empty these days, as I'll not hide from you, for you'll find it out soon enough. And I'll see what can be done about supper as soon as may be, but I'm short-handed at present. Hey, Nob, you slow coach. Tell Bob. But there, I'm forgetting. Bob's gone. Goes on to his folk at nightfall now. Well, take the guest ponies to the stables, Nob, and you'll be taking your horse to a stable yourself, Gandalf, I don't doubt. A fine beast, as I said when I first set eyes on him. Well, come in, make yourselves at home." Mr. Butterbur had at any rate not changed his manner of talking, and still seemed to live in his old breathless bustle. And yet there was hardly anybody about, and all was quiet. From the common room there came a low murmur of no more than 2 or 3 voices. And, seen closer in the light of 2 candles that he lit and carried before them, the landlord's face looked rather wrinkled and careworn. He led them down the passage to the parlor that they had used on that strange night more than a year ago, and they followed him, a little disquieted, for it seemed plain to them that old Barliman was putting a brave face on some trouble. Things were not what they had been, but they said nothing and waited. As they expected, Mr. Butterbur came to the parlor after supper to see if all had been to their liking. As indeed it had. No change for the worse had yet come upon the beer or the victuals at the pony, at any rate. "Now, I won't make so bold as to suggest you should come to the common room tonight," said Butterbur. "You'll be tired, and there isn't many folk there this evening anyway. But if you could spare me half an hour before you go to your beds, I would dearly like to have some talk with you, quiet like, by ourselves." "That is just what we should like too," said Gandalf. "We are not tired. We have been taking things easy. We were wet, cold, and hungry, but all that you have cured. Come, sit down, and if you have any pipeweed, we'll bless you." "Well, if you'd called for anything else, I'd have been happier," said Butterbur. "That's just a thing that we're short of, seeing how we've only got what we grow ourselves, and that's not enough. There's none to be had from the Shire these days, but I'll do what I can." When he came back, he brought them enough to last them for a day or 2, a wad of uncut leaf. "Southlinch," he said, "and the best we have. But not the match of the South Farthing, as I've always said, though I'm all for Bree in most matters, begging your pardon." They put him in a large chair by the wood fire, and Gandalf sat on the other side of the hearth, and the hobbits in low chairs between them. And then they talked, for many times half an hour, and exchanged all such news as Mr. Butterbur wished to hear or give. Most of the things which they had to tell were a mere wonder and bewilderment to their host, and far beyond his vision, and they brought forth few comments other than, "You don't say." often repeated in defiance of the evidence of Mr. Butterbur's own ears. "You don't say, Mr. Baggins, or is it Mr. Underhill? Yeah, I get so mixed up. You don't say, Master Gandalf. Well, I never. Who'd have thought it in our times?" But he did say much on his own account. Things were far from well, he would say. Business was not even fair. It was downright bad. "No one comes nigh Bree now from outside," he said. "And the inside folks, they stay at home mostly, keep their doors barred. It all comes to those Newcomers and Gangrels that began coming up the Greenway last year, as you may remember. But more came later. Some were just poor bodies running away from trouble, but most were bad men, full of thievery and mischief. There was trouble right here in Bree, bad trouble. Why, we had a real set to. And there were some folk killed dead, if you'll believe me." "I will indeed," said Gandalf. "How many?" "3 and 2, said Butterbur, referring to the big folk and the little. "There was poor Matt Heathertoes, and Rowley Appledore, and little Tom Pickthorn from over the hill, and Willie Banks from up away, and one of the Underhills from Staddle, all good fellows, and they're missed. And Harry Goatleaf that used to be on the west gate, and that Bill Fernie, they came in on the stranger's side, and they've gone off with them. And it's my belief they let them in, on the night of the fight, I mean. And that was after we showed them the gates and pushed them out, before the year's end, that was, and the fight was early in the new year, after the heavy snow we had. And now they're gone for robbers and live outside, hiding in the woods beyond Archet, and out in the wilds north away. It's like a bit of the bad old times tales tell of, I say. It isn't safe on the road, and nobody goes far, and folk lock up early. We have to keep watchers all around the fence, and put a lot of men on the gates at nights. You can go home again, but you can't go home again." Or Sean and I might have said on the PPP, no changes are permanent, but change is. Poor Butterbur has had a hard time of it as of late, even though, as we'll see next week, his beer has done quite well. And of course, we know things will get better. There is a king again, even if old Barliman won't quite believe who that king is. For now, though, folks, that does it for this week's Third Age Thursday. We'll continue this chapter next week. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show. You can get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. Please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as I welcome another special guest for Fandom Friday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow at Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.